Welcome to one more episode of your favorite podcast, Save It, Spend It, and Share It. We thought it was going to be the last episode, the one we recorded about Christmas. But guess what? I wanted to do something special for each one of you, and I said, I'm going to give you a bonus for the year 2025. So we have here a very special guest with us today that we will be hearing more about, and it's a very exciting information we're going to be hearing about podcast content. So let's go ahead and begin with our podcast. Hello, how are you doing?
Hi, Kathleen. How are you?
Please share your name.
My name is Danny Chan. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Southern California Conference, and I collaborate with you and the other officers in the leadership of this conference.
It's very exciting to hear that someone else has a podcast.
Yeah, so you and I have embarked on this journey of podcasting, just trying to provide some content that connects with our ministry leaders in our conference and people wanting to learn. And so I'm actually quite honored to be here because I understand that we're celebrating something. I understand that this podcast is an award-winning podcast. Is that true?
That is correct.
Wow.
I am so privileged to work with the producer, Michelle Noland.
Yes.
As you know, she does an amazing work here at the conference.
Does.
And she does all of her video editing, audio, and so many other things. And because of this podcast, her work was awarded. So now we can say that we're an award-winning podcast.
That's right. So I'm honored, even though I'm not an award-winning podcaster like you. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. What an honor.
Yeah, no, I want to hear more about your podcast because I feel that we need to get the word out there. What else are we doing here at Southern California Conference? What is the name of your podcast?
Thank you so much. So I host the Ministry Path podcast, which is available, as you know, on not just YouTube, but on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And the intention is for us from the ministerial department of our conference to provide content that's helpful to pastors or to ministry leaders. So I've been listening to your podcast, which has provided some really, really great content on the area of finances and estate planning and some other really, really helpful financial matters, which you're just so uniquely qualified to speak on. My podcast has more to do with practical ministry things related to the challenges that pastors and ministry leaders are facing. Pastors are very often first responders, and so how do they manage, the challenges with that? And we talk about leadership. We talk about the effects or the use of AI in ministry, and what are the pitfalls? What are the ethics behind it? So what we try to do is just provide very, very practical tools and conversations related to ministry for pastors and for ministry leaders.
Oh, wow. So I've been seeing some of your podcasts, how you're supporting pastoral ministry and so on. And one of the episodes had to do with stress, coping about stress. Do you see stress in the pastoral field?
Oh, yeah. That's one of the topics I would say that we've been really honing in on. And we've invited some really, really qualified mental health specialists, several who have come on the podcast to address these issues. Obviously, I have some understanding as a pastor of some of the challenges of managing ministry, the joy of ministry, and also the heavy side of ministry. But we've consulted with some social workers, some mental health specialists, and who have helped us to kind of understand, okay, what are the effects of stress in ministry and actually even trauma. We've tried to understand. We had an episode where we talked specifically about what is trauma and what are some trauma triggers, because pastors were learning to understand that they are first responders. People express to them very, very heavy topics, and they have to deal with crisis and loss and spiritual existential crises that sometimes trigger some responses in the pastor themselves, and it can impair their ability to serve, or could cause them to have what's called compassion fatigue. We talked about compassion fatigue and how that becomes a barrier for us to be able to minister. So some of these mental health specialists have helped us to understand, okay, how do you manage stress and trauma and triggers so that we can minister effectively?
And you repeated several times stress.
Hmm.
It's something that we all deal with at different levels.
Hmm.
But what did you learn from that episode? Is there actually something that we can adopt and to our daily routines, or something that
Hmm.
you could give us a tip of something that was talked about in that episode?
Yeah. So we one of the things that was affirmed, I think, in the conversations we've had with several mental health specialists is that it has affirmed the value of prayer, the value of having a healthy rest rhythm, even the value of a Sabbath. The whole discussion about mental health, which is something we hear a lot about in today's social media and in the news. We're finding that the things that even non-Christian therapists or researchers will recommend are things that are already biblically in the like, for instance, rest, a Sabbath, and they call it, sometimes they'll call it meditation, but whether it's meditation or prayer, research has been finding that all of those things and having a healthy rhythm of those things does reduce stress and can help us to cope with very, very stressful situations, like things that happen, like whether it's fires or stressful situations, with that are happening all around the world. And one in particular, therapist was showing us about how even throughout the day we can take a daily rhythm to be able to, wow, if we're watching something in the news or on social media, or like a personal life event happens, to pause. And if we see that our heart is elevated, to kind of do like a self-check where we can measure, we can even take our pulse to see, oh, wow, my pulse is really elevated. Or we just kind of sense that, wow, I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm feeling stressed. And then, so what do you do? What are you supposed to do, right? So one of the things that that research has found is that breathing helps to regulate those emotions. And so, one of the episodes, she was talking about it, and then she asked me to do it. And I said, all right, so let me do it. And so she said, take a deep breath, and then before releasing it, just count to 4. So I took a deep breath. I count, and then my natural response was to let it go. But then I had to think about counting to 4, and then to exhale, and then to try it again, but then to count to 4. So then automatically your mind is now thinking about counting and breathing. And just that very simple thing immediately takes you out, or it resets you away from what you're thinking about, the heaviness of the moment. And then you start breathing normally, and it could help to kind of regulate your feelings, and you begin to decelerate your heart rate. And sometimes we don't recognize how accelerated heart rate and the stress, we just kind of let it continue. But we just have to find a simple way, even just a simple way of breathing, just to kind of to take us away from the stress, and to be able to reduce the anxiety and the heart rate. That's just one simple step, right? And then, of course, we talked about the value of prayer and the value of quiet time. Our day is just so full of so many things that sometimes we have to be intentional about finding a good, healthy rhythm of quiet time, of putting away our phones, and then, of course, prayer, of developing a consistent prayer time. All of these things have a way of helping us to regulate and to be able to cope with the difficulties that we face.
Yeah, and I think that during this season that, we're getting very overwhelmed spending and traffic and people everywhere making purchases, I think this would be a very appealing episode for the season. So if
Yes.
you would like to see this episode, you can go ahead and look for episode number 1. This was the first episode, and it was called Stress Coping Strategies. It would be perfect for the season, and it would be a great introduction for you listening to this podcast. It was a great episode to begin with.
Thank you.
And, putting together all the episodes, there's some work behind kind of pacing the episodes and when they're going to be released and how they're going to be put together. So when you are looking for your next episode, what are some of the things that you considered?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, the podcasts are very collaborative. We are always looking for what are some of the topics that are most interesting and that interface the most with ministry, whether you're a pastor or a ministry leader in the local church or school. And so we kind of compile a list and we start to figure out, all right, what are some of the most like either heavy topics or some of the most pressing needs that we see in ministry. And then we're like, okay, how can we address that? And so we start looking for qualified guests who can help us with that, whether it's a mental health specialist or we've done like a podcast on leadership. So you and I know that John Kress is such a wise and experienced leader. And one of our episodes was on the 4 stages of ministry. He talked about how sometimes when a pastor or a ministry leader steps into a new field, they can experience a lot of frustration if they don't understand what ministry stage that they're actually in. And so sometimes they try to implement change when they're just starting out without building kind of the required trust in that leadership sphere. And so understanding at what stage we are really facilitates our leadership, and it lessens our frustration when we're trying to get things done without recognizing what stage we're in. And so really, really practical leadership things that we've been able to share together. Another episode, we talked about how do you find and meet needs in the community. And we interviewed Bob Hudson, who leads Care Portal. And Care Portal is this platform where social workers are inputting needs in and around our churches and schools. And so it's an app where you can see the different needs that are popping up. And many times we're not aware that there are people that we could connect with. We could be the point of contact, people that come and help people in our community. So that was a really helpful episode. So it's basically what we try to do is we try to come up with topics that are most helpful to ministry leaders. And we're so blessed to have 2 things. First of all, Michelle, who she's an amazing producer, award-winning producer.
She is.
And she's behind the scenes a lot, but she is kind of the engine that makes all of this go. And then secondly, we have an amazing studio. If people could see behind the scenes, sometimes we'll show behind the scenes footage, but we have been very blessed to have people who've allowed us to get to this place, to have a studio where we can create content that's intended to bless our ministry leaders and beyond, right?
Yeah, and right now we're wrapping up the year. We're wrapping up the year, and we're getting together the last episodes. This is the bonus episode for the year. And what is your goal with this podcast? Where would you like the podcast to reach?
So the goal, I think, of the podcast is to equip and to provide resources for ministry leaders. And so the whole purpose of why we exist is to lift up Christ by cultivating healthy churches and schools. And as you know, we believe that the best way to cultivate healthy churches and schools is to develop leaders. So what we're trying to do is to provide resources and interviews, and sometimes we'll have, hey, what's the most helpful apps, or how do you use this tool, or how do you utilize AI for ministry, so that the leaders can be developed, so that they can have resources. And so if you have a listener who thinks that they have somebody in mind, they say, wow, I bet so-and-so would really benefit from this. What we'd love for people to do is to share the podcast or to share the episode, so that we can reach as many leaders who can be blessed by it, because we have one mission, right? Whether it's a podcast, your excellent podcast about finances, or about ministry, if we can collaborate together so that we can share this with leaders who can benefit from this, that would be the goal, is to just try to reach as many leaders in our conference and beyond with some of these resources.
Wow. Well, how do we find you?
Okay, so just like your podcast, the Ministry Path podcast is available on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and for those of you who like to see kind of the visually the podcast, it's on YouTube. So you go to SCC Adventists, or you search for SCC Adventists, and then you can find us on YouTube. You can subscribe. Please be sure to subscribe. That way you're always notified. And then, of course, to share that with somebody who you think might be blessed by it.
Great. It was great having you today and giving us a preview of what your podcast is about.
Thank you so much.
Now, we hope that some of our listeners will be able to join and follow the podcast, so they can follow along and hear a little bit more about the different topics that you share with your audience. And like you said, this is all possible because of our donors. Mm-hmm. We couldn't have this place if it weren't for the contributions and gifts from all of our donors. This year, I believe 2 years ago, we started purchasing the tables, microphones, but we were not quite there. And because of all the offerings and gifts that we received, we've been equipping this space. So I really want to say thank you very much for your contribution and offerings. You are making a difference in Southern California Conference. So thank you very much for listening to our episode, and we hope you have a Merry Christmas.
Yes, Merry Christmas.
And a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We'll see you next year.